I'm going to try to summarize different things. I know some of them you've studied, maybe all of them you've studied. Good to have you all here. It's good to be back here. Seems like ages and ages I haven't been here. And this young man I don't think I know. Do I?
Jason.
I know Jason.
That's Brian.
That's Brian. Okay. I know you. You're her son, right? Okay. And that's Jason. Okay. Fine. Did you bring your Bible and notebooks?
No, I didn't.
Somebody can loan them a Bible. Maybe there's one around there someplace in a piece of paper or notebook thing. We're going to see a lot of Bible verses tonight. And jump. We're going to see a lot of things that if you haven't studied it and you don't know about it, just hold on to it. And you can ask the Mayos or Brother Mark or somebody afterwards and fill in the spaces. And if they can't fill in the spaces, then next time I come, we'll fill in the spaces or whatever. Here's a chair over here. Why don't you bring it, put it over. You set it over there where... All of the questions that were asked basically have a theme in it. So I'll try and hit from the very beginning and go right through and try and answer as many as we can before it's time for some of y'all to have to leave. Who was in the beginning? God. Genesis 1:1. Let's read it all together. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Before anything was, God was. God is the beginning. And as much as they don't want to admit it in these days of humanism and atheism and communism and all the other isms, God's Word is still truth. And I think y'all have seen this before, haven't you? It's a simple outline of the time chart. And God always has been, God always will be. Okay? He didn't have a beginning, He'll never have an end. And all you have to do is look around you at the nature, look around, just study a little bit of anatomy, look at a microscope, what the beautiful things and the fabulous things that are inside of a cell. And you have to know that there had to have been a creator for all of that. We could not be here with our intelligence, our perfectly functioning body in one sense, without some mastermind being behind that. So even though man tries to deny it and man tries to go any way he can to push God out of his mind, if he really didn't believe God didn't exist, he wouldn't be fighting God so much. And the fact that they fight God so much means that deep down inside they know that God's there and they're trying to put His voice out and try to put the conscience out. But in the book of John it says that every child that was born on this earth had a light shone in them, that God exists. Have you all seen that Bible verse? Let's go to John 1. And we'll come back to Genesis. It's a tremendous Bible verse because it does away with so many of man's accusations against God. Well, you know, so-and-so didn't know, and well, the pagans down in the jungles, and verse 9, John 1:9, it says, John speaking here, and he's speaking of Jesus, who is the light, and it said, that was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. And just mark this because this Bible verse will have to do with something we'll see a little bit later. It said, every man that cometh into the world.
That was the true light. Which lighteth.
Let me pick it up a little bit farther. It said, verse 6, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. The same came for a witness to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. Now who did John bear witness of? Jesus Christ. He came to bear witness of that light. That was the true light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. So when a baby is born, the minute he takes his first breath, the light of God shines down on him and says, I exist, look for me. Seek me and you'll find me. God puts that in the conscience of every person that comes into the world. So there's no excuse. On Judgment Day, man will not have an excuse that he didn't know the Bible, he never heard a Christian preacher. Everything around us is teaching us that there's God. Read Romans chapter 1, chapter 2. It tells us everything around us teaches us of God. And so everything started with God. Everything was in the beginning was God, and that was it. There was nothing else. But out of God has come everything that surrounds us. Everything that we know, everything that we have. Okay? And one time in past eternity, God had a son. And this son was in a seed form. In one sense, he didn't have a body, because he took on a body when he came and was born down here on earth. Okay? But he was back there, and through his son, God worked and created everything that is around us. He created the angels. He created all of the heavens, as many heavens as there are. He created all of the universes. He created the little microscopic things, the atoms. Everything was created by God through his son, Jesus Christ. Okay? And we read, let's go back to Genesis now. And this is a real big study that there's a book on you can order from Sister Hicks if you want more information on it. This time chart has to do with our time. Okay? Has to do from Adam, when Adam began, to the end of time. Just put Adam here. Back here in the garden. Okay? But in Genesis 1:1 it says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Now, when was the beginning? Don't know. The Bible doesn't say. But it says there was a beginning. And in that beginning was God. And you all that are going to be getting the tapes, you'll be getting something about this. Of the beginning, God. And anyway, then it says, verse 2, it says, and the earth was void. And the earth was void. In the beginning, God created the heavens of the earth. And then the next verse says, and the earth was void. So that means something happened between those two verses. Okay? Because the and connects it. But then God doesn't create things that are of no good. The earth was without form and void. Let's go to, see if we can find Isaiah 45.
In between those bands? Between verse 1 and 2?
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah 45?
I think it's 45. Isaiah 45. Might be 34. Let me see. Let's go to Isaiah 45 anyway. It's a good verse. Isaiah 45 is one of my favorite chapters. Isaiah 45:18. It says, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. He created it not void. Okay? He formed it to be inhabited. And yet we see in verse 2 that it was empty. And it was vain and it was void. So it means that something had to have happened before verse 2. Because God didn't make the earth to be empty. He made it to be inhabited and he made it to be full. Okay? So in verse 2 it says it was empty. That's not how God created it in the very beginning. In the very beginning. It was made to be inhabited. And so through the Word of God there's evidence that there were 3 creations before ours. And this is where you're going to have to get the book and study it. It's a book about this big called The Missing Link. And if you all get it, it'd be good for the kids to get it and read it. But there were 3. The only reason that God destroys anything is for what reason? Because of sin. The only thing that makes God mad enough to destroy whole nations or whole creations is sin. So if it says here that this earth was without form and void, that it means there had to have been a sin in the past that was terrible and horrible to the extent that God had to wipe out everything. And we'll see another Bible verse in just a minute. But there were three creations. And let me just put them like this. Creation 1, Creation 2, Creation 3, and this one here is number 4. We are in the 4th creation right now. Okay? And each time this creation fell into sin, God had to destroy it, and it went into the pit. And God took it up out of the pit, repopulated it with a new creation, with new people, new animals, and brought it up to a second creation. Okay? And the second creation also sinned, and God put it down into another pit. And God took it up, brought it out, repopulated it, put new animals, new plants, new people, and once again it fell into sin. It rebelled against God. The same way that we're rebelling against God right now. The whole earth is turning against God. There's going to be another destruction. So God put it down into this last pit, which in our Bible is the bottomless pit. It's the the Tehom, the Shakath, the Bor, the Tehom. Is Shakath? Shakath, the Bor, and the Tehom. When the Bible speaks of the pit in our Bible right now, it's basically referring to this one pit. The Tehom.
It's called the bottomless now for the 4th creation.
No, I took that back. The bottomless pit is a part of hell, where the most proud go.
So what is that called in about? What is the 4th creation gonna?
And we're in the 4th creation. Okay. So God brought it up, and I'll put the 4 here. This is Genesis. This is Genesis 1:2. We're in the fourth generation. Okay. Now each one of these had an evil angel. Each one of these had an enemy of God that fought against certain aspects of God, that rebelled against certain aspects of God. Okay? I don't know if you've heard, have you studied any of them? You've hit them. The angel here was called Father Wicked. And the angel here was Mother Wickedness. Even the women got in on it. And the one here is Abaddon. And our angel is called Lucifer. Okay, the only thing God right now is interested in our souls, in our growing up, our getting a relationship with Him. So He hasn't gone into a lot of details about these other creations. I'm sure it's in here. Sister Hicks hasn't taught a lot on it. But she has shown us that there are these pits where God put these other creations because of their tremendous sin. And it's good for us to know this because these enemies are coming after us right now. And we're fighting these in a certain way that I'll explain just a little bit later on. Okay? So just remember that these are enemies, tremendous enemies that have hated God from the very beginning. And this last one, Abaddon, it mentions him in the book of Revelation. Let's go to Revelation 9. Now this is the one right before ours. And when they found the dinosaur bones, and all of these bones of prehistoric men and women and these huge dinosaurs and everything, they try to connect it with this world, with this creation. But we'll see a Bible verse in just a minute where God made a definite a wall between these two creations here, okay? But somewhere back on this earth there were dinosaurs, there were those, what they call cavemen, but really they were tremendously intelligent people, even probably more intelligent than what we are, as much as we like to think we're pretty hot. They were very, very intelligent beings. They weren't the cavemen dragging around their wives by the hair type, you know, out there with skins on and, and a spear in their hand. There was a lot more to it. And a lot of those bones and a lot of those civilizations, a lot of the myths and a lot of the stories, you know, Atlantis and all of these things, you know, that have been coming down, and the stories in the Indian tribes and so many things, and you know, those landing airstrips in Peru, those huge designs, those came someplace from somewhere, and it wasn't definitely from the Indians of Peru in these last, you know, in this time. So they had to have been from some intelligent being that could, from the sky, look down and make those designs in such fabulous ways that they did it. And so there's two problems here. The scientists say that it was with this earth, and the Christians say it couldn't have been on this earth. It's all a lie, because it's only 6,000 years from Adam to where we are now. Okay? And so the Christians lose out because they don't know how to defend themselves, and the scientists make the Christians mad because they come up with these things, and they have the evidence. They've got the bones. I mean, those bones didn't just appear out of nowhere. And so how do you explain it? You explain it basically because there were three creations before us, and what went on in these creations we don't know a whole lot about. But we know enough. God gave us enough for us to understand what the problem was, what we have to fight now, and how to defend the Word of God and defend His righteousness in these last days. So when they start telling about evolution and all of this sort of junk, I almost was an atheist. I was on the edge of it. I know exactly what it feels like to believe that there was no God. But at the very edge of that, I knew that evolution was a tremendous lie. And yet I couldn't stop believing it because I had so many spirits on me at the time. And, well, it's a whole other study. Maybe some other time we can just sit down with the young people and talk about evolution. But it's so illogical if you really look at it. And if you really read your books when you're at school, it says it could have been this way. We believe that it was this way in their science class. If you read your book, pay attention to the wording, and you'll see that they don't definitely state it was this way. It is believed that, and we think that, and it could have been this way, and it could have been that way. So what man has done is build up a whole theory around a few bones that doesn't click. It doesn't make sense. Okay? So, Revelation 9, just real quick. I don't want to get tied up too much in this. Revelation 9, verse 1, it said, and this is in the tribulation, right in the middle of the tribulation when everything's going to get horrible. And it says here that there's a pit. An angel was given the key to the pit, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as scorpions of the earth have power. These aren't literal locusts. These are spirits that are going to be loosened during the tribulation period. And they're coming out of the pit, so they already existed down there in some place. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass, nor the green thing, neither any tree but only those men which had not the seal of God on their foreheads. We all better get the seal. And, well, we all better not be here in the tribulation to begin with. And it says, and to them it was given that they should torment for 5 months. Their torment would be like the torment of a scorpion. So here we see a spirit that's a locust and a scorpion at the same time. So here we see perversion. We see a mixture. Okay? And then it says, and in those days shall men seek death and not find it. They will desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locust were like unto horses. Whoever saw a locust like a horse? You know what a locust is, like a big grasshopper. Okay? So here's locust, horse, and scorpion all mixed together. If this were the study, I would draw it here. You draw a horse, and then you put a scorpion tail on it, and you put wings on it like a locust. If you can start imagining a creature like this that is a mixture of different spirits. Okay? And the shapes of the locusts were like horses prepared to battle. They're warriors. And on their heads were crowns of gold. They were powerful. Their faces were like the faces of men. They had human faces. A horse's body, locust wings, scorpion tail, and the face of a man. And they had the hair as the hair of a woman. Face of a man and long hair. And they had the hair as the hair of a woman. So here's a man and a woman, horse, scorpion, locust, the whole bit. It's all mixed up. It's all a perverted. These are perverted spirits. So this is starting to tell us that the problem here was perversion. Perversion. What is perversion? Without getting into too deep in it.
It's something good that's been used for the wrong thing.
And this type of perversion, where there would be a mixture of animals and men and
something that's good that is used for the evil.
And one of the best things that God has given a human being is a sexual relationship in a marriage. Okay. Now, when man uses that gift of God outside of marriage in any way, it's perversion. Okay? Even if it's fornication or adultery, it's still a sin. But then when you start getting off into other perversions, homosexuality, lesbianism, and they're telling our young people that that's okay, it's a perversion. God destroyed the prehistoric earth for that perversion. It is not correct. It is not permitted. It's an abomination to God. It's an abomination. That means God gets sick to his stomach when he sees a person doing that, because it's complete rebellion against what God has made. Okay? And so these creatures were perverted. It said they had breastplates like breastplates of iron. They were strong, they were hard, they had no heart in them. The sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots and many horses running to battle. They had tails like unto scorpions and a sting in their tails, and their power was given them to hurt the men for 5 months, like an AIDS that people can't die of, or a homosexual desire that can never be satiated. Just torment, and they never come to an end to it. And then it says, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue his name is Apollyon. So here we see Abaddon mentioned, which is the king over these perverted creatures. Okay? So is this clear up to this point? So in these prehistoric times, these people, the angels perverted themselves with human beings. The human beings perverted themselves with animals and with each other. And in mythology, you have the satyr, and you have a satyr, monitor, whatever it is. Centaur. What was it? A bull and body of a bull and the head of a man, or
One's the head of a man and the rest of a horse.
A horse. And then they have the winged Pegasus, the winged horse.
And the griffin. The eagle
and all of these are spirits that are mythological. We think, well, somebody just dreamed them up, but they didn't dream it up. They had visions, or the devil put it in their minds, because these are spirits that exist today. If we had our spiritual eyes open, we could see them floating around. And as we come closer and closer to the end, one of the big sins and one of the big things at the end of our time over here, in this time here, is going to be perversion, when we see it coming on. Perversion. So the spirits are getting stronger and stronger and worse and worse and worse and worse. And if we could look around us, we could see them. We could see them pounding us. We could see them attacking other people, and so many things going on. And these are tremendously powerful spirits. Okay? So they had an angel over them that was Abaddon. Okay? Later on, some other time, I'll give you the ones on Father Wicked, Mother Wickedness. But these were the three that were before this creation. Okay? Let's go back to Jeremiah. What was your question again? About the dinosaurs, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the dinosaurs were on all of these creations. Some of the Christians try to say the dinosaurs were before the time of Noah. But the scientists find by their methods and all that they were billions and billions of years old, some of these bones. So how could it be before the time of Noah, which is like 4,000 years ago? So, I mean, something doesn't check out. But if you know the truth, then you study the truth, you can understand that all of these things that they're finding did exist. But they did not exist in this earth. Well, it's on this earth, it's one earth, but not in this creation. Okay, they were in a creation between Genesis 1 and Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, where God left a gap, because all he's interested in right now is where we are. And as far as we're concerned, that's all that's interested in. I mean, that's all he wanted us to be interested in, basically. But here in Jeremiah 4, we see a description of this prehistoric earth. Verse 23. It said, I beheld the earth. And before I go on, there was a time in Mexico where there was an article in one of the papers. I don't know why I didn't cut it out, or if I did cut it out, I don't know why I didn't save it. If I saved it, I don't know where it got lost. But there were some scientists in France that went into those caves. There's some real famous caves that have prehistoric paintings on them in France. And they went into these caves, and they started studying these drawings on the cave walls that are prehistoric. And they thought caveman, hair pulling, that type of... And they studied these, and they came to the conclusion that the people that had put those drawings on the wall were very, very intelligent. And they were not the caveman type like we understand, but they were very, very advanced in technology, very advanced in their education and in their knowledge. And this was just a secular group of scientists that went over there to study it. And it comes together exactly with what Sister Hicks has been teaching us through the years, that these were intelligent beings back here and had great knowledge, great technology, and many things that we don't really think of when we think of the, what do you call it, the Flintstone type. Think of the Flintstones wandering around. Verse 23. Now look real careful what it says. Jeremiah was a prophet. And being a prophet can look forward and a prophet can look back. Okay? Most of the time we think he looks forward, but Moses wrote about the creation by looking back. And a lot of prophets look back to explain what happened in the past. So they can look back. So Jeremiah at this point is looking back in time. Okay? And he says, I beheld the earth. Okay? Like he was up above it and he's looking down on it. And lo, it was without form and void. Now when is the only time that this earth... In the beginning, in Genesis 1:2. Verse 23. Jeremiah 4:23. So he's looking back and he's looking on this scene in verse 2 of Genesis, where it's still void, it's still without form. Okay? And it says, and the heavens, so the heavens existed at that point, the earth existed at that point, and they had no light. It's like there had been light, but the light had gone out. Then he says, I beheld the mountains. Now in Genesis 1:2, the mountains still had not been made. So he's looking back in that space between verse 1 and verse 2. Okay? You understand? The earth is without form and void. And he looks back and he said, and I saw the mountains. Now if you read on down in Genesis chapter 1, the mountains weren't made until like verse 5, 6, or 7, where it says, and let the earth come forth out of the waters. So he's looking back before these mountains, between here and Los Angeles, were made. He's looking back before that. And the mountains existed. Okay? So if everything started right here with Adam, then this could not be true. There had to have been a creation before Genesis 1:2. You understand what I'm saying? And he said, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. The hills existed. And then look what it says. I beheld, and lo, there was no man. And all the birds of the heavens were what? Were fled. Can something flee that hadn't existed?
No.
So before it was void, before it was before it was empty and void, without form and void, there were birds, and there were men, and there were mountains, and there were hills. You understand what I'm saying? And then it said, I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness. So they had fruit trees and granaries and valleys of, vines and cabbage and all this sort of good stuff. The fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down. So they had cities. And a city implies government. It implies science. It implies architecture. It implies a social life, not the caveman type, not the hair-pulling type. It was a structured, organized society. And God went because of sin. And he said, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord, and by his fierce anger. And we saw a while ago the only reason he gets angry is because of sin. And what has happened through all of these creations, man has gotten so proud that he thinks he can get along without God. And it comes to a point where he rebels so tremendously against God, basically in perversion and in tremendous pride. And perversion is a type of pride that goes beyond anything we can think of. And God can't tolerate it anymore, and he puts them into the pit. Even the pit, the bottomless pit nowadays, in our time, is for the most proud people. God puts in the pit, the bottomless pit now, people whose pride goes beyond what he tolerates, what he can tolerate. We're all proud. And there's pride, but there's some that just go past the line, and God says, okay, boy or girl, you go down into the bottomless pit, because there's a little bit more pressure down there to break your pride. And then he said, for thus saith the Lord, the whole land shall be desolate, yet will I not make a full end. So he wiped it out. The whole land was desolate. But he said, but I'm not going to make an end. I have one more creation to do. Okay? For this shall the earth mourn, and the heavens shall be black, because I have spoken it and I have purposed it. So God made a complete break there. The whole land shall be desolate, yet will I not make a full end. And then if you read on down farther, it talks about verse 29, the whole city shall flee for the noise of the horsemen and bowmen and the thickets, and they climb up in the rocks, and every city shall be forsaken, and not a man shall dwell therein. So they had armies, and they had soldiers, and here it calls bowmen and horsemen, but it could have been rockets and and F-15s or whatever they are. Could have been a lot of things that they were riding on that poor Jeremiah never could dream of. So I said horses instead of, I couldn't find the right terminology. But anyway, this is a description of the prehistoric earth number 3, right before us. And it was in this time then that Abaddon was reigning and causing so much destruction. And it was on this earth, or some of the others, or these others, that the dinosaurs and the dinosaur bones were laid in. When the destruction came, this prehistoric earth was destroyed so quickly that the mammoths were frozen, that they can eat. They can still eat the meat of the mammoths. God's destruction fell on it so quickly that nobody could do anything. And a lot of these God just wiped out completely. There's no, maybe down in the silt, down at the bottom of the oceans, we'll find sometime all of the evidence of these other creations. But God has wiped a lot of this evidence off because of their sin that was just so tremendous.
How did the dinosaurs rebel?
They rebelled the same way that man did. Man's perversion with them, and man taught them to rebel against God. And the nature around us now knows that there's a God, praises God. The Bible says that the animals of the field praise Him, the trees praise Him, they clap their hands, the rivers sing to Him and praise Him. And so even nature can rebel against God. And the fact that God destroyed creation means that they did, because God's not going to destroy the animals if they're innocent. Okay? And just to skip ahead just a little bit, to put in a little bit more ammunition for the lies that are being thrown out there in the society we live in, Sodom and Gomorrah was completely wiped out. Men, women, children, animals, nothing left that city. And I think a lot of times maybe it's because they had so much AIDS and so many diseases there that the only thing God could do to sanctify the land was send fire on it and sterilize it because of all the sin, the perversion, and the horrible things that were going on at that time. And then Noah, in the time of Noah, that was another time that God just wiped out everything. Animals, people, the only thing that lived were the fish. But everything else was wiped out completely. And once again, it was because of the sin of perversion. The angels with men and men with men and women with women and so on and so forth, and all the whole bit as far as perversion goes. And God just wiped it all out because of the sin. What was your question again?
How did dinosaurs begin?
But after that, just right now you asked me. What did he ask just right now?
Oh, he asked about dinosaurs.
But just right now he asked me another question. He raised his hand. Anyway, I was answering that. I just want to know if I answered it.
When it comes to Noah, he didn't destroy the whole earth totally, but he still did a destruction then, didn't he?
He destroyed everything except those 8 souls that were in the ark.
That were in the ark, and the animals that were there. So he partially did a partial destruction because of sin during Noah's time. And then Sodom and Gomorrah was not the big area, but just a city that was perverted.
I've explained it to our people many, many times, the only sin for which God destroys complete nations or complete creations has been the sin of perversion.
He was still battling the sin of perversion.
Because these spirits,
that has come from the previous creation that just floated from those time frames up until
these spirits are still loose.
Okay, so in like with the father wicked, those perverted spirits went to mother wicked earth frame or whatever, and then from her to bad. So that's why ours is so much because there's all of those in our time frame.
Plus Lucifer.
None of them go down into the pit and stay there instead of coming back into the...
I'll explain the separation. What time do you have to leave?
Around about 10-ish, 10:30.
Yeah, about 10:30.
Okay.
Brother,
Let's run on.
Question. The thing about aliens, are they just glimpses of just the imagination, or is there something that
UFOs and things like that?
have been seen that have actually existed in other creations? Are they just catching glimpses?
They're spirits.
Now? They're just spirits.
They're spirits that people see.
Yeah.
And because they are in ships and all of this sort of thing, then it's something from these prehistoric times. And Sister Hicks has said that the UFOs in particular have to do with the tribulation. So the more UFOs people sight, and in these last days and all, they're getting ready for the tribulation. Probably, there was a great convocation. What do you call it? A great congress, a get together in Iceland back in last month, October. And all the New Agers, a lot of New Agers went there because UFOs were supposed to come down on some big iceberg or glacier up there. And so the New Agers went to wait for their spirit guides or for their Christ to come, their Messiah to come, and so we're living right up at the end times. We see it all over. The signs are just all around us, and we have to battle all of this. That's why we need to get in. We need to run. We need to pray. We need to battle. We need to get all of the weapons of warfare that we can get, and push through, because all of this is coming against us to keep us from the prize and to keep us from keeping our salvation, at least to keep our salvation, because they want to pull us down into this. And if they can't get us on physical perversion, they're going to get us on spiritual perversion, and that's filling our churches tremendously. Mental and spiritual perversion, mixing worldliness with the spirituality of the church, the Word of God, twisting the Word of God to accommodate my desires or my doctrine. This is perversion. This is a mixing of light and darkness, of truth and untruth, and it's coming on us, and we have to get into the Word to be able to discern where this is coming. Just recently, a friend from Indiana called and told me that everybody in Indiana was reading a special book. I won't even say the name so you won't go buy it. But it's an after-death experience, somebody that died and then came back to life. And if you've read a book like that, let me know, and I'll tell you if it's that book, and I'll tell you. But anyway, she said, oh, everybody, and because it has so much truth, it tells about how we existed in the loins, how we existed before, and how everybody has a purpose in life, and we came down to fulfill that purpose. I mean, just write down Crucified Way teachings. Wow. And God led me to that book the very next day. On a Sunday evening when the bookstore shouldn't have been open, I walked up to it, and here it was right in the window. And so I got it and read through it while I was waiting for a phone call that evening. About 3/4 through, I started feeling shaky, rebuke, funny, you know, like I feel when something's not right and when there's a spirit wandering around that's powerful. I started feeling that, but even before that, I started seeing this thread woven through. She talks about being with Jesus and this love relationship with the light of Jesus Christ, and here's the truth, and it was a New Age book. It was a New Age book, and here a lot of our people were reading this book. So I faxed off a note to Sister Hicks, and somebody said that a few days later, she said, you stop reading that book. Well, she said, you can read it if you want to. I mean, she doesn't tell us what to do and what not to do. She said, you can read it if you want to, but I suggest you don't read it because it's full of New Age. And so this just shows you, that how and this person that wrote it was a Baptist. And you can mix in. You don't have to go into physical perversion. You can have spiritual perversion and still be pulled down into this. So we've got to get in the Word, and we've got to shake off the devils, and we've got to get the power. Y'all need to save up to go to convention this year. Save every penny you can to get to convention, so you can get a vision and get a touch and get a run. And maybe the Lord will come during this convention. Maybe He'll just take us up. So is this clear here? Is that clear?
Ask me later.
Any questions y'all have? You know, you said Noah was an example of a prophet. And then he said, did Noah look forward or backwards?
Moses. It said Moses looked backwards to write about Genesis. Because Moses lived a long time after, but yet he wrote the first 5 books. He wrote Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4. He wrote about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And he wasn't there, so it had to have been the spirit of prophecy that took him back. Okay? So here we are now with this angel, Lucifer. Okay? And still, in this time here, let's study just a little bit here to explain some things. One of the questions that was asked about the loins, or you didn't know about the loins, how we existed in the loins before. Predestination. Okay, so this is clear here. This was all happened before our creation. So we're still back in eternity, okay? And God made this beautiful angel, Lucifer, to rule and to reign. Let's go to Ezekiel 28, and I won't study it because there's a book on it, and maybe you've already studied it with Judy Lynn.
Got one question before you go. Right there where you have Lucifer and our fourth creation. Is that where we are in the stones of fire? Is that where we were made at that time, or we were made even back before
We were made.
all the wicked got here?
We were way back here,
Okay.
but I'm going to make it.
No.
I'm just going to make it more simple. I don't want.
But that's